What if I told you that Mercedes had been hiding the true potential of its car for several races, and that Russell revealed it all in just one lap in China? Because what we saw in the Shanghai sprint qualifying was not just any pole. It was a lap that left McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull looking at the data without understanding how it had been possible. George Russell appeared in the last phase of the session and set a time impossible to match, leaving his own teammate Antonelli almost 3/10 behind and putting Mercedes in an unexpected double on the front row. But what was truly shocking was not the time itself. It was Lewis Hamilton's reaction when he saw how that Mercedes behaved on the track. Because Hamilton knows that car better than anyone. And what he saw in Shanghai was something that had not happened in Brackley for years. A car that performs exactly as its engineers expect. And that's where this weekend's big question begins. The Chinese Grand Prix has always been a circuit that reveals uncomfortable truths in Formula One. Shanghai has that special characteristic. Its long curves, the combination of endless straights and technical zones, and above all the thermal management of the tires immediately expose the real strengths and weaknesses of each car. It's not easy to hide a fast car here, but it's also not easy to hide one that doesn't work as it should. And precisely for this reason, what happened in this weekend's sprint qualifying has raised so many questions within the paddock. From the beginning of the session, there was a certain tension in the atmosphere. The sprint format does not forgive mistakes because the teams barely have time to adjust the cars. Just one practice before going straight to fighting the timer means that every setting chosen is almost a gamble. If the car's balance is not in the correct window from the beginning, the weekend can become complicated in a matter of minutes. This pressure was noticeable from the first few laps, where several drivers struggled to get the tires warm and find the necessary grip on an asphalt that was still evolving. However, in the midst of that initial chaos, a detail appeared that some engineers immediately began to notice. The Mercedes seemed to behave differently than the rest of the cars. While several teams needed 2 or even 3 attempts to find the sweet spot on the tires, George Russell's car seemed to get into the rhythm almost immediately. There were no sharp corrections in long corners, nor obvious traction losses exiting slow turns. It was a car that transmitted stability, something that for years had been precisely Mercedes' big problem with this generation of single-seaters. The session progressed and little by little the times began to fall. McLaren looked strong, Ferrari showed signs of progress, and Red Bull was trying to find its usual rhythm. But then came the decisive moment of SQ3, the last phase of sprint qualifying, where everything is decided in a single attempt. That's when Russell took to the track and executed a lap that completely changed the narrative of the weekend. The Briton clocked a 1 minute and 31.520 seconds that no one could match. Not even his teammate Kimi Antonelli, who finished almost 3/10 behind, ensuring an unexpected double for Mercedes on the front row. Further back appeared Lando Norris with the McLaren and then Lewis Hamilton with the Ferrari, more than 6/10 behind Russell's time. A huge difference for such a short classification. From the outside, the result was already surprising. But inside the paddock, what really caught the attention was how Russell had achieved that time. His return did not seem forced. There were no dramatic corrections in the steering nor moments where the car seemed at the absolute limit of grip. It was a clean, controlled, and extremely efficient lap. And that type of execution usually indicates something very specific in Formula One, that the driver has complete confidence in what the car is going to do in each corner. That detail was the one that immediately caught Lewis Hamilton's attention. Because if there is anyone who perfectly understands how Mercedes behave in extreme conditions, it is him. For years he was the one who had to deal with cars that, despite having potential, did not always respond in the way the team expected. There were entire seasons where the car seemed competitive in simulation, but on the track it became something completely different. It was unpredictable, difficult to adjust, and extremely sensitive to small configuration changes. So when Hamilton saw the way Russell was driving that car in Shanghai, something didn't add up. It wasn't just a quick lap. It was the way the Mercedes seemed to work with the tires, the ease with which Russell could attack the apexes and maintain speed through the long corners of the Chinese circuit. Everything indicated that the car had a much wider operating window than Mercedes had had in recent years. Russell himself hinted as much after the session when he explained that one of the things he liked most about the new car was that it responded exactly as the team expected. That seemingly simple phrase hides an enormous technical reality within Formula One. It means that the correlation between the simulator, the work in the wind tunnel, and the real behavior of the car is finally aligned. In other words, Mercedes could have solved the biggest problem they had had since the beginning of this regulatory era. That is the detail that begins to shape the true mystery of this weekend. Because when a team gets its car to respond in a predictable way, everything changes. Engineers can fine-tune the balance, drivers can trust the car's behavior and technical development becomes much more efficient. Suddenly, every improvement made to the car has a clear and measurable effect. And if that's really what Mercedes has achieved, then Russell's pole position in the China sprint could be much more than just a one-off result. It could be the first sign that the Brackley team has finally found the key they have been searching for years. And as Lewis Hamilton began analyzing the data from that session, one thing became clear in his mind. That Mercedes was not the same car he had left behind. After the sprint qualifying, while the spotlights and cameras focused on George Russell's pole position, a much deeper analysis began inside the garages. In Formula One, a fast lap is never simply interpreted as good driver performance. Each sector, each microtime, and each telemetry are studied with a magnifying glass. And when the engineers began to compare Russell's data with that of the rest of the grid, something appeared that did not quite fit with the usual logic of the Shanghai circuit. Mercedes' advantage was not concentrated in a single point on the track. Normally, when a car stands out in classification, it does so in a specific area. It may be top speed on a straight line, performance in fast corners, or traction in slow areas. But Russell's return showed something different. His time did not depend on a single dominant sector, but on a general consistency that allowed him to gain small tenths in various parts of the circuit. That is much harder to achieve and usually indicates that the car is operating within a very stable aerodynamic window. And that detail is precisely what began to attract the attention of Lewis Hamilton. Because Hamilton knows very well the type of problems that Mercedes had suffered in recent years. For several seasons, the German team's car had a very clear characteristic. It could be fast at certain times, but it was extremely sensitive to changes in conditions. A small variation in asphalt temperature or tire pressure could completely alter the balance of the car. It was a difficult car to read, difficult to adjust, and even more difficult to push to the limit consistently. However, what Russell was showing in China seemed exactly the opposite. The Mercedes was not only fast, it seemed predictable. And in Formula One, that word has enormous value. A predictable car allows the driver to push harder, because he knows exactly how the car will react when entering each corner. You don't need to constantly correct or anticipate unexpected reactions. You can simply focus on maximizing every meter of the circuit. That was the first indication that something important was happening within the Brackley team. When Russell spoke to the media after the session, he dropped a phrase that many overlooked, but which to technical analysts had enormous meaning. He commented that the car now reacted exactly as the team expected based on their simulations. In other words, the behavior on the track finally matched what the engineers had designed in the wind tunnel and in the simulator. For any Formula One team, this correlation between virtual data and reality is one of the most important factors in the development of a car. If the simulation models do not match what happens on the track, each update becomes an uncertain experiment. But when everything is aligned, car development becomes much more efficient and each improvement can be applied with much greater precision. That means that Mercedes could have solved the problem that had limited them the most since the introduction of this generation of cars. But there is another aspect that began to generate even more curiosity in the paddock. The way Russell is blowing up that car. During his time at Mercedes, Hamilton was known for seeking aggressive setups to try to unlock the car's maximum performance. Sometimes it worked, but other times the car became extremely difficult to drive. Russell, however, has taken a different approach. Their setups tend to be more balanced and stable, prioritizing the car's consistency throughout the lap. That approach seems to be fitting perfectly with the Mercedes' new behavior. And when Hamilton saw the comparative data between his Ferrari and the car he had driven for so many years, the conclusion began to become evident. The difference of more than 6/10 in the sprint classification was not only explained by a perfect lap by Russell. It also reflected a car that was operating within a much wider performance window than its rivals at the time. That's exactly what makes this situation so interesting. Because if Mercedes has really managed to build a car that combines speed with great aerodynamic stability, the impact could go far beyond a simple pole position in the sprint. It would mean that the team has finally found a solid technical base on which to develop the car throughout the season. And that raises a possibility that just a few weeks ago seemed unlikely. That Mercedes can once again become a true contender in the fight for the championship. But there is still a key question that many within the paddock are asking. If the Mercedes is so strong, why had that advantage not been seen so clearly before this qualifying in China? Because if something characterizes Formula One teams, it is their ability to hide certain cards until the right moment. And that opens the door to a theory that is beginning to circulate discreetly among paddock engineers. The possibility that Mercedes has been hiding some of its car's true potential. until this weekend in Shanghai. What we saw in the Chinese Grand Prix sprint qualifying may seem at first glance to be just a great performance by George Russell. A perfect lap, a well-balanced Mercedes, and a pole that surprised many inside and outside the paddock. But when you take a closer look at the details, the story seems to go much deeper than a simple qualifying session. Because the real news is not only that Russell was the fastest in Shanghai. The real news is how he did it. A car that was stable, predictable, and able to perform from the first attempt in a session where most teams were still struggling to find the correct tire temperature. That consistency in all sectors of the circuit is precisely the type of signal that engineers look for when they know that the car is operating within its optimal performance window. For years, Mercedes faced a problem that seriously limited its competitiveness: the lack of correlation between what its engineers saw in the simulator and what was really happening on the track. It was a car with potential, but difficult to understand and even more difficult to squeeze the most out of it. However, everything indicates that this problem could have been drastically reduced. Russell made it clear by explaining that the car now responds exactly as the team expects according to its simulation models, something that in Formula One can make the difference between fighting for points or fighting for victories. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.